Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Bunch of Us podcast. This is Dan here with Blake. Big Cass couldn't be here today, having some family, some family stuff he has to attend to. We wish you well, Cass. Much love to the family. Um, but Blake, I have a question for you. Is Big Noon on the hot seat?
Well, Dan, it's really good to be here and definitely praying for Cass and his family. But Big Noon, I think we need to pray for them too, because they've got to do something. I think we need to see Ohio State. I think we need to see Michigan, Oregon, Penn State, USC, the premier brands of the Big Ten. I think they need to approach Tony Petitti and see if we can get this figured out because having Ohio State carry six straight noon games. I think five of them are big noon to close the season. You just can't have that when you
No.
have some of these big games. We need to see some flexibility in the scheduling. And then I know we had so much talk about the West Coast teams coming in here. I just don't see what value they add to a big noon slot for Fox. I mean, it's great for the Big Ten nationally, but it doesn't help the big noon window when Fox has the premier pick every single week. Ohio State's going to rate regardless of who they play.
I think the West Coast teams, they're more for the Peacock slot in the NBC. That's what I've kind of gathered. They're trying to it feels like they want to keep it as like a Pac-12 after dark, but it does not feel the same. It doesn't feel like we get enough Pac-12 after dark anymore. Like obviously Pac-12's gone, but like if we get maybe one night game a week between the OGs of the Pac-12, it feels back to Big Noon though. You're absolutely right. Five Big Noon games and then six noon games in a row. Five out of six Big Noon ones on BTN. It's just also not fair to the conference, man. It's just not fair to, I think Indiana versus Michigan, that should have been Big Noon over Purdue, Ohio State. Now, I'm not an expert on the TV rights. I'm not sure how that works, but you would think that they would want to have that as the Big Noon game. And then wouldn't it make sense for Purdue alum Gary Danielson to call the Ohio State Purdue game at 3:30 on CBS in Columbus? They could have broken it up there. I understand why the Penn State game was on Big Noon. That's fine. But then or even Nebraska, I understand. I don't understand though. The Indiana game being on Big Noon, the Purdue game being on Big Noon, and I don't understand why this game this week at Wrigley is not is was going to be at noon when this should definitely be a 3:30 game or even a night game. Imagine Wrigley at night. I'm not sure how the lighting situation is, but you would have to think too, like that would look so cool on TV.
Yeah, then a couple of things there. I'll go back to Wrigley at the end, but the Big Ten, this whole media deal, Kevin Warren, we know, was a disaster as the commissioner of the Big Ten. And this was his parting gift. And it was really presented as such an awesome opportunity for the Big Ten to partner with three networks. You have Fox as the primary shareholder, then you have CBS and you have NBC. And the whole premise of this was, well, we have the West Coast teams we're adding. We're going to be able to give you 12 to 15 hours of college football. We're going to have a noon slot, 3:30. We're going to have a 4:30 kick, 7, and then you even have 9 or 10 o'clock kicks if you're in the middle time zones or the Western time zones, and you could do college football all day. But the problem with that is the rest of the Big Ten is not that great this year. And I was talked about on our show
Yeah.
with the SEC, it's a lot deeper of a conference. So you have more widespread competition out there where you're like, okay, we're going to watch Alabama, LSU at this time, and we're going to watch Ole Miss and Georgia. But the Big Ten's pretty much giving you one and a half good games a week. So when you have, like you were saying, Indiana and Michigan, sure, that's a great game. That should be the big noon game. But is that game going to rate? And pretty much what Fox told you is Ohio State playing a 1-7 Purdue team is going to rate better and be a better national product because of Ohio State than a 9-0 Indiana team who is one of the great sweetheart stories of college football this year against defending national champion Michigan, who sure is having a disappointing season, but they're just telling you Ohio State's going to rate better. And it's not all the way fair to the Buckeyes to be caught in that spot where they have to carry the conference on their back.
And I understand that Michigan did get a lot of Big Noon games in the past couple of years. They absolutely, they deserve their credit for, also carrying the conference at times. But I will say they never had five straight games. Like literally a half of the season, the college football regular season is
Yeah.
12. The back half is all noon games. That's just insane. And we're not even talking about the first half of the season too, because I'm just trying to. Marshall was a big
Marshall.
game. I believe was Akron a noon game?
I think Akron was 3:30. I think Ohio State has 7 of 12 noon
Seven.
games this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You're right.
Ohio State's gotten the short end of the scheduling stick all across the board. And now with the top five matchups, you can't really project that when you're making the schedule. But
No.
tell me a top five team who has number one played 6 straight noon games to end a season and then have two of those 3 noon games be against top five opponents. So now Ohio State's playing 3 top 5 games, assuming the Buckeyes win this weekend. 3 top 5 games in what, a 5 or 6 week calendar span. When has a team ever had to face that in a regular season? Not to mention, let's say Ohio State wins out, they go to the Big Ten championship. There's a fourth. And then if they get to the national championship, they could play potentially 6 top 5 matchups in one season. I don't think any team has ever had to do something like that.
No, I think you're right, Blake. It's crazy. And I love how we're complaining about this and not the actual game Saturday because the Buckeyes, the game itself was just it was a snoozer, bro. It's crazy that Big Noon said, "Oh, this got so many ratings." It's just because Ohio State's fan base is so big. It would get that many
Yep.
ratings on Peacock, CBS, uh, ESPN, the Ocho, like whatever channel it's on, True TV, like we'll watch. Um, but Ohio State, they play Purdue, and Purdue, I'm not gonna lie, it felt like they were playing to not lose by 60. It felt like they were really trying to possess the ball, and just really kind of bleed the clock and kind of keep everything in front of them. It was kind of a pretty uninspiring performance from Purdue. But I feel like they're definitely better than a 1-18.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think you get caught in college football looking at people's or teams' records and saying that's what you are, that's how you identify. I don't think that that's the case. I mean, look at a team like South Carolina, the teams that they've lost to this season. They've lost to really good teams. Look at Louisville, they've lost to really good teams. And it's hard to take that into consideration when you're looking at a team. You're like, oh, they have 3 losses, or they have 1 loss, or they have 7 losses, like Purdue. You have to look down the schedule and who they played. And I think we're going to really get into that debate with this 12-team playoff because the SEC is backloaded. We're going to see how they fill that. And Indiana, Dan, I don't know your thoughts on this, but if they lose Ohio State, they're 11-1. I still think they should be in the playoff.
Oh,
But how does
absolutely.
the committee evaluate that against an SEC team with 2 losses that maybe has a stronger strength of schedule? I think that debate's going to be open and
Well,
relevant.
I'll say this: if the committee wanted the Champions Classic, they should have flipped on ESPN last night and watched the college basketball games between Michigan State and Kansas and Duke and Kentucky because that's what the playoff I feel like is kind of becoming.
Mhm.
It would absolutely disgust me if Indiana goes 11-1 and you make an argument for somehow Georgia, with 2 losses or Alabama getting in overhead. Like it's not how it should work. If you have fewer losses and you've been consistent and they've been a consistent team all season, they've been they're top five even with 1 loss to a high like probably the number 2 or potential number 1 team in the country, Ohio State. It should absolutely under no circumstances ever kick you out of the playoff. You should at very minimum be the 11th or 12th seed. That would just be such a travesty and not what this playoff was designed to do.
And that's what I was just going to say. We expanded this playoff in the name of access. And you're giving access to a team like Indiana, which would not have a path to a 14 playoff before. You're giving access to a Boise State, to a Colorado or a BYU, should they win the Big 12, to an SMU. You're giving access to these schools now. And then just to go through the same argument where we're like, okay, this logo is going to get in or this brand is going to get in. Now, listen, I get the strength of schedule. And you know what? If the debate is between a 10-2 Tennessee and an 11-1 Indiana, I would pick Tennessee to win that football game. And then you're into the best versus most deserving. Like, I get the strength of schedule arguments, but we just have to be careful when we're saying we're expanding this in the name of access, but then you really just go ahead and put in your name brand schools.
I mean, I think if they're going to want to do the brand bias, they should do it at the top of the playoff and give the bigger brands the benefit of the doubt. But I think it should kind of work the opposite at the bottom end. So like the bigger brands like Alabama, when the years they struggle, it should go to the teams that are more deserving. Because a bad year, a 10-2 year for Alabama, or even like Ohio State, like a 9-3 year should not get us in. And like I wouldn't want us getting that benefit of the doubt just because of our brand. at the expense of another team. I would though want them to bump us up if we're like, on the 5 or 6 seed and potentially we could get the bye. That's when I think it's fine to use the bias, not to kick the other teams out though, and like because then it just becomes an invitational.
Right. And I think too that they're eventually going to get rid of these auto bids. I don't think auto bids are the right way to go for conference
No.
champions because it's completely uneven. I mean, Dan, look at this. Ohio State and Oregon are at the top of the poll. Oregon's number one. They beat the Buckeyes by a point, potential rematch coming. Whoever wins that game, even if Ohio State loses a second time, they are still one of the 4 best teams in the country, and under a 14 playoff would be a top 4 seed, even with 2 losses. And I think it would be a disservice to the playoff system if Ohio State goes and beats Oregon, because Oregon technically beat every team on its schedule. Ohio
Mhm.
State technically beat every team on its schedule with a win over each other. They should both be in the top 4. So I think that's something that's going to be fixed after these first 2 years.
I I agree, and I also would like so I think they need to cut down on they need to keep one spot for a group of 5 team, and with the other spot because you want to obviously keep it so four teams, then 6 at large, like the 4 champions, 6 at large, one group of 5, and then hear me out, the last to 12 spot. If this team does not qualify already at like through
Mm-hmm.
champion or at large, it should go to the team who has the Heisman, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the
Interesting.
Heisman should be an auto bid to this thing. Like they could have 3 wins, but like you got RG3 or whatever. Like I would love to see that. And I think it would just add way more value to the Heisman, and because the Heisman is so valuable, it's such a great honor. And we want to see the Heisman in it. Like I feel like that's kind of a way to keep it interesting.
I actually think that's not a bad concept to do. I mean, I'm a proponent of I think the Heisman voting should take place after every game is played, but I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So it's not a bad concept to at least put out there, and especially in this year's case. And I know Boise is sitting there as the leader of the G5 teams right now. If they get in Ashton Genty, you want to see him in the playoff. But let's say Army beats Notre Dame in a week. Army is probably going to jump Boise State and be finish undefeated, and they'd be in the playoff over Boise with potentially Ashton Genty winning the Heisman or Colorado with Travis Hunter. I mean, either one of those teams would be a lot of fun.
And too with with like Boise State fought really close to Oregon too. That would
They
be
did.
crazy. Like it's just this new playoff format is definitely flawed. It needs to be definitely looked at, I think is what our point is.
Yep.
But back to Purdue. Um we just got to hand out some Buckeye leaves, Blake. I'm not sure if you've ever done this before, but me and Cass, we hand out a couple each game. So I'll give one right away. I'm gonna say Will Howard, 21 for 26, 3 touchdown passes, and a rushing touchdown, set the tempo early, nice, and a couple nice passes to Jeremiah, um, G Scott, and Emeka for touchdowns. So Will, great game.
I'm going to go with Jack Sawyer. He's a hometown kid. I think Cass is going to like this pick. This was probably one of his because I know he covered him. He's a Pickerington North product. He's a great guy. I've heard a lot of good stories about him, people close to his family. And I'm going to give it to Jack Sawyer. I know JT Tuimoloau, while those two play dynamically on the outside, they had the strip sack, and Jack Sawyer took that in for a touchdown there on the scoop and score. So I'm going to give my first one to Jack Sawyer.
Love it. My next one, I'm gonna give it to Trey Henderson. Six
Mm-hmm.
carries for 85 yards and a touchdown, and he had notched 3 catches, 43 yards, over 100 yards from scrimmage, and honestly, just a yards per touch monster this game. Over 100 total yards on 9 total touches. Just monster day for Trey.
Yeah, Trey's been outstanding this year, and it's true what Ryan Day's been saying with Quinshad Judkins. Those two are pushing each other to be better. They're carrying less of a load, but they're producing at a higher level. And I think they've been great as a 1-2 punch. But for my next Buckeye Leaf, I'll go Jeremiah Smith. He broke Chris Carter's record. He now holds the record by himself for freshman touchdowns in a single season with only 9 games into the season. So he's averaging a touchdown a game. He's been tremendous as a receiver. He's the best player on the field in most cases. So I'm going to go ahead and give that to Jeremiah Smith. 6 catches, 87 yards, and that touchdown to break the record.
I love it. We gotta give a special teams one. I think this one's a pretty no-brainer this game, and it has to be Caden Curry with the
Mm-hmm.
blocks. Uh, You know, game was kind of lazy. at that point. It wasn't super exciting, but you know who was excited to play is Caden Curry. He was excited to get there in special teams and make a big block. So great play, Caden. He absolutely earned a Buckeye Leaf for just setting the tempo this week. That was exciting.
Can I give out a co-Buckeye Leaf for my last one?
Absolutely.
I'm going to split this between Cody Simon and Caleb Downs. I think Cody Simon has come on very strong in the back half of the season here. He had 6 tackles. He had 2 by himself, but he got in on a sack and a tackle for loss. And I think seeing his linebacker play continue to elevate, he's wearing the Black O jersey. It's great to see for him to play at this level, and he needs to play at this level down the back half of the season and into the postseason for the Buckeyes. And then Caleb Downs, I think, is the best defender in the country. I mean, you look anywhere on that field, and number 2 is there. He flies to the ball, plays downhill so quickly. His tackling in space is among the best that I've ever seen. His raw ability, he is a gift to this Ohio State defense and the heart and soul.
Do you with Caleb, do you think he has a chance to win any of these major awards, or do you think like with him not getting like the interception numbers, is that hurting him?
I think it's possible that it is, but Ryan Day has said it best all year. This team's not after the individual awards. And do I think we have deserving players on this team? Yes. Do I think we should have Heisman caliber people on offense as players? Yes. But if this team beats the team up north, wins the Big Ten, and wins a national championship, I think they're going to be good, but I do think Caleb Downs should be in that conversation nationally for awards. I think so should Will Howard, both running backs, Jeremiah Smith. Emeka Ibuka doesn't get as much praise as he should either. I mean, Emeka Ibuka is the most unselfish player in college football. He has been a leader for this team. He is the heart and soul of that wide receiver room. And I do think that we should have some guys in those national conversations more than we do.
I agree. It's obviously a hot topic right now with the SID. I know SID is getting a lot of flack, but
Yes.
I'm not gonna go there. Let's move on to Northwestern.
Yep.
So Buckeyes, they travel Northwestern, they play them this week at noon, as we've discussed before. Northwestern, not really flashy, 4-5, 12th overall in the Big Ten. Offensively, not crazy good at all. They're about the most stereotypical Northwestern team of all time, I feel like.
Yeah, nothing really jumps off the page when you look at them. I mean, the running game is okay. It's nothing scary, and I don't see a mid-level or a bottom-level Big Ten team throwing the football successfully, consistently on this Ohio State defense. So I do think it will look closer to the Purdue game than the Nebraska game in terms of Big Ten competition at this level. And I think Ohio State should have its way offensively and defensively. I just don't know what the field conditions are going to be like. And we talked about this pre-show. It's really going to be interesting seeing the approach from Ohio State offensively and defensively with however the field conditions are. I know Dave mentioned they can't even go to the locker room at halftime. They got to go to the bullpen. Just what are we doing?
That's so funny that they have to go to the bullpen. It's interesting to me. Like they've obviously done this in the past, and it's been okay for the most part. Like I know they did it last year, and I know like Yankee Stadium has had games like the Pinstripe Bowl. We discussed this
Should
about
run out to enter Sandman in the second half from the bullpen. Speaking of Yankee Stadium.
they're gonna have Devin Brown running out to the Edwin Diaz trumpet song.
Yeah.
Buckeyes up 45-0 at halftime. But it's just we talked about this before the show. I'm just worried about the field conditions. I just hope that Ohio State can get out of this game clean because
Right.
there's no way that Northwestern's going to put up against this Ohio State defense. The way this defense has been playing, there's no way they're going to put up more than 10 points. More than 10 points would be a miracle. A lot would have to go wrong defensively and offensively too for I think Northwestern to get to that mark. So I don't think they're a threat, Northwestern. I am worried that we might come out slow. And that's really it.
Yeah, I that's more so what I was getting at when I was saying the offensive and defensive game plan. I think it'll be more of a shell coverage for Ohio State. It'll be more of a safe approach. Offensively, I think we're going to look to run the football. I think it'll be some rhythmic throws. I don't expect to see a lot of stuff on the boundaries along the sidelines. It's just very tight quarters. Even in the red zone or in a goal to go situation, you got to watch because I think it's the right end zone that has the wall coming up to it close. I mean, you really have to watch. And and scheme specific plays. So I do think it'll be a slower, let's feel out the game start because they know they're going to control it. Not in a place where you're ever going to lose or play too conservative, but I do think that will be factored into the play calling in that opening drive script.
I think we'll see some mesh routes.
Yeah.
I think not anything close to the sideline, but enough where they can kind of make the defense run sideline to sideline.
Right.
Uh, I also think we might see some vertical shots. I think Jeremiah will get behind him at least once or twice.
Yeah, I think up the seam too.
Absolutely. Cass sent me his prediction. He says due to being an odd state due to this being an odd situation with the stadium and the turf at Wrigley, Buckeyes slow the game down and won't go up tempo. They try to get backups in quickly so the scoring will not be at will as normal. Look for James Peoples and Devin Brown to see a lot of playing time and predict Bryson Rogers to get in the end zone. That's what Cass wanted to say. I do agree. I think I just see I see it kind of being like the Purdue game. It's the thing is like when the backups get in, they just don't do anything. It feels like
It becomes very, very vanilla. I
it
think when the
does.
backups come in, you can predict how it goes. Run right, run right, run left, first down, short pass, run right.
If
It's just
backup makes a
dry.
dumb penalty, dumb
Sure,
drive stall.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right. So I'm with you. The other thing too, Dan, is I want to see what the offensive line does again. They had to get up for the Penn State game. They followed it up with a great performance at home. This is going to be a new environment in Wrigley Field, odd situation, like Cass said. How does the offensive line respond to something like this? They've been penalty free the last 2 weeks. I think that is Buckeye Leaf worthy, and they need to play at that level down the stretch. But the offensive line is the group that I want to watch early just to see how they respond to the field, to the environment, and to Northwestern.
I'm gonna watch Emeka Ibuka early. He when he comes to play early, like he sets the tempo for this team a lot of the
He
time.
does.
Yeah, if Emeka makes a great play early, the offense will always gets going. Like
Mm-hmm.
the heartbeat of this offense at times, and it doesn't have to be a catch. It could be making a block. It could be a jet sweep. I'm gonna watch Emeka and see what he does because his leadership is so valuable. And if you'll know right away if Emeka comes out and just sticks a dude, it's gonna be a nice, easy day. If Emeka comes out and drops a pass, we might be in for a little slower start.
Yeah, no, I think it's completely valid. And it kind of takes you back to the opening drive of the season where they try to hit Jeremiah Smith on a quick screen and the blocking is there, but Jeremiah Smith just doesn't catch the football. Do they go back to something like that where you're saying Abuka's involved in blocking down the field? I know that's something we've seen Travion Henderson and Quidshot Judkins both be great in this year, and that's an unsung thing for the offense that's been really helpful to them. So do they look for a situation like that or to try to just run the ball all the way down the field? I'm curious to see Chip Kelly's approach.
I think there'll be a mix. I could see G. Scott getting involved again. I feel like he's been coming on very nicely lately.
Yeah, he's been a good addition filling in for Will Kazmarek. I would like to have Will Kazmarek back to have both of those guys available, but G. Scott is a talented player. He's a veteran on this team, and it would be good to see him involved, especially in the red area.
Absolutely. All right, Blake. Um, let's go with score predictions for this one. I'll read Cass's off first. He sent he sent 36-8 Buckeyes, just barely covering was his prediction. 38-6.
See, I don't disagree with him with the 38 points. I just think this is not a game where you're going to see a lot of flash from the Buckeyes. I will go 41-3. I think that Ohio State's going to win the game. I think they're going to cover. And I think it's a slower start, but they put up enough points, get the starters out in the third quarter and just get out of that game clean, like you said.
I'm gonna go 35-0. I think Northwestern, they don't do anything offensively. I think it will be kind of like the Purdue game. The Northwestern will kind of play some ball control though, play not to lose by 60. They'll bleed some clock. And their defense is competent enough where we won't score every time. But we eventually, once you score one or two touchdowns and their offense isn't doing nothing, the defense eventually gives up. And then by the time we get to 35 nothing, it'll be late third, early fourth. Backups will be in and nothing happens. Run
Yeah,
left, run right punt.
right.
Um, all right. That's so yeah, those are our predictions. Oh, real quick, shout out to sponsors, Forever Game Day. Go use our promo code NUT. 15% off your first purchase. Some great shirts. Forevergameday.com. Right here's the logo. I'll plug it obviously in the Twitter and all that. But great partners. Got my Harvey Updike Tree Service shirt on. It's the most funny. It's the funniest shirt for. I love it. Um, but anyway, we got to do our picks. Blake, I almost called you Cass. um, Cass sent me his. Pulling up the picks real quick. Um, I'll read Cass's picks. And these will kind of let us know what games we're picking. Cass said Colorado minus 11 and a half, Tennessee plus 10 and a half, BYU minus 2.5, Pitt plus 10, Pitt plus 10, Oregon minus 14.
I like those picks. What game you want to start with? Start Colorado.
Yeah, let's start with Colorado. They play Utah. Um, and this is at on Fox at noon, but it's I think this is Big Noon.
Yeah, I think it's a 10 o'clock local, if
It
I'm not
is.
mistaken, because of the time difference.
Yeah,
This
it
is
is.
a rarity. I will go Colorado to win that game and cover. I actually think Colorado wins the Big 12 and goes to the playoff as the number 4 seed.
I'm not gonna. I'm gonna go with Utah here. I'll take the points. Absolutely. I just think that's a lot of points to be giving to Utah.
It is. I think Utah has a little bit of a hangover from the Holy War. The way that game ended, a little demoralized. I
Yeah,
think there's that carryover effect in the game for Colorado.
I could see it. I'm still taking the points, but I can absolutely see that. Um, this is the biggest game of the week. Um, honestly, a monster matchup, and this is an elimination game for Georgia. Number 7 Tennessee, number 12 Georgia, ABC. Georgia is a 10-point favorite, minus 10. Um, I'm gonna take Georgia just because Kirby's gonna be so angry, I feel like.
I agree with you. I don't think Georgia loses this game. I think this is a game they have to win. And I think it's a game they will win. If Nico plays, Tennessee covers. If Nico does not play or is not fully healthy, Georgia will cover.
Yeah, I like that. Um, this is the Dan preseason special. This is Kansas, 10 at BYU. It's a 10:15 p.m. kick. It's at in Utah at BYU Stadium.
Oh,
Kansas is only a 2.5 point underdog. I'm gonna take Kansas. I feel like for some reason Kansas is gonna win this. I love Kansas obviously in the preseason, bro. I picked them to win the Big 12. I still think they're a good team. This is their game, man. This is the game to make some noise.
that number is actually gone down since we picked it on our show, and I took BYU, and now I'm tempted. I already felt that line was fishy, but I mean, I have to take BYU because I need to stay consistent. But that is a very fishy line, and I actually would give a slight lean to Kansas now, seeing that.
Yeah, it's something that doesn't make any sense if you like have watched the football this year. That line doesn't make any sense. Um,
No.
next game. This has pretty big, I believe, ACC implications. This is Clemson, number 20, at Pitt. Clemson's a 10-point favorite. It's at noon. I'm gonna go with Pitt here. I'm gonna take Pitt with the points. The Pitt's kind of hit a little struggle the past couple weeks, but they were having a really good season.
What's the spread here, Dan? It's 10.5,
10, just 10.
10. Hmm. I like Clemson to win the game. I'll take Pitt to cover. Keep it close. Clemson struggled the last couple weeks.
I like it. Um, and our last pick, we got Oregon at Wisconsin. Oregon minus 14-point favorite. I'm gonna just take Oregon and not really think much about this one. I just don't think Wisconsin on offense, there's so much to be desired. And Luke Fickle, he's just I'm not gonna say disappointing, but just that I just expected them to be a little more together at this point.
Yeah, Wisconsin has some things to figure out. I liken this game to the older Ohio State Wisconsin matchups where you just saw the speed on the outside take over the game. I think
Yeah.
that's exactly how this works with Oregon. It's that same style matchup right there. Styles make fights, and I think it's going to be a fight for a quarter, quarter and a half, tighter at halftime. But I think Oregon eventually pulls away and they cover and win big.
Well, you can even see in like the Bama game,
Yep.
Wisconsin had a good quarter, and then the other team just pulls away.
And
And
even
it's
against Penn State, same story.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're absolutely correct. It's just they're not finishing Wisconsin, and is it? Do they need a quarterback? Do they need I don't know. It just they just don't finish the game strong.
Yeah, they need an identity. Jeff Longo tried to get the air raid offense to be in there. You need to play Wisconsin style football in Madison. I think they need an identity and to stick to it, recruit that way, and play that style of football.
The Dairy Raid, the dumbest name for an offense. So
It's
stupid.
funny.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's all I got. Blake, do you have anything else you want to say to the people before we head on out here?
I gotta say, go Bucks. I like how this turnaround has gone on. I love the play from the offensive line. I am excited for the back half of this season. I will be in Columbus for the game Thanksgiving weekend, so cannot wait for that one. So I think it's going to be good. Regularly is going to be fun, but hopefully safe and clean.
That's all we want. Safe, clean, fun. Yeah, I'm excited for the rest of season two. I made a decision not selling the Indiana tickets. It's
Good
when
call.
no, it is because I'm like they're worth so much money, but it's priceless because Indiana will never be this good again. I guarantee you, I could live to 150 and I will never see this again. So that's why I'm keeping the tickets. I think.
That's smart. How many people can say they've been to a top five matchup with Indiana, which is exactly your point.
That's my point. Yeah, I'm like it's yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's all I got. So thank you so much everyone for listening to another episode of the Bunch of Nuts podcast. Go to forevergameday.com, get some t-shirts, promo code NUT, and go Bucks, baby.